Hello LifeSpring Church, I'm missing you, sending greetings from the Lucas family, and I'm really missing worshipping with you, I have to be honest. These are crazy times, but I'm taking great heart at the moment that none of the circumstances we find ourselves in today are a surprise to God. In fact, just about every article you read right now, every news story that you listen to is talking about the foreseeable future. Wasn't God good to us back in January of this year when in His wisdom He revealed to us the antidote for the foreseeable future, and that is the faith-seeable future? You might remember that I shared with you two quotes from Oswald Chambers. The first one about faith. Faith is a deliberate confidence in the character of God whose ways you may not understand at the time. And then the second quote was that the root of all evil is the suspicion that God is not truly good. So let's be clear, coronavirus is not from God. And yet we can see Him working such good in the midst of fear and separation and displacement and sadness and crisis. You know, God is faithful. He's full of mercy and kindness. And I believe He is wanting to prepare us as His people in this time for the season to come. When we can open the physical doors to LifeSpring Church again, I believe we need to be prepared for an influx of new souls. So we need to be preparing now. And there's a great story in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 to 7, where we read about a widow who her husband has died, her creditors are chasing her down, and they want to take away her 2 sons in order to pay her debts. And she's desperate. And you know, it is desperate things and desperate times that drive us into deeper relationship and revelation from God. And that's where this woman found herself. So in 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 through 7, we find her calling out to the prophet Elisha. And Elisha says to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" And she replies, "I have nothing in my house except a jar of oil." And then the prophet says to her, "Go, borrow vessels from your neighbors, even empty vessels." And he instructs her, "Do not get a few. And you shall go in and shut the door behind you and your sons and pour out into all these vessels, and you shall set aside what is full." So she went from him and shut the door. And her sons brought her the vessels, and she poured. And it came about that when the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is no more." And the oil stopped. And I believe there are 4 things God is wanting to say to us out of that story for this time. The first thing is God is saying to us, what do you have in your hand? What do you have in your house? You know, you may feel like there's a lot that you used to do that you can't do right now. But God is looking for what you have, not what you don't have. God called fishermen to be fishers of men. So, what do you have in your hand right now? I believe God is also saying to us, don't get a few. You know, reach out, reach far and wide. I'm very mindful in this season that I've only been in the house I'm in for a year, and I don't really know my neighbours as much as I'd like to. But this is a time, obviously not visiting your neighbours, but to connect and to build relationship and to reach out to your network. You know, there are people who would never step into the doors of a church who are watching church online right now. There are people having conversations about God that never would have happened had we not found ourselves in this crisis. I also believe God is telling us to shut the door. And not only has this lockdown forced us to physically shut the doors to our church and to our homes, but it's caused us to shut the door on a whole lot of other things too. Things like what we might have considered to be our gifting and our ministry, the things we were good at, maybe our past perhaps, but it may be even past successes. But when we shut the door, God can work a miracle. And when that widow shut the door, God started to pour out his anointing to her and his provision to her and his plans for her. And the fourth and final thing I believe he's saying to us is about the fact that the oil stopped. You know, the anointing and the outpouring and the miracle working power of God knows no limitations except our faith.